co host, Dr. Joe Perez. How are you today, Dr. Joe?
Hey, Tiffany, I'm doing great, thanks. How are you doing these days?
Amazing. And today's
That's good.
topic is critical thinking. But before we dive into this topic, you're always so active, Dr. Joe. Why don't you share with us what you've been up to with myself and the audience?
Sure, absolutely. There have been a lot of things going on. I have not been overseas since the last time we talked. With the conference in Prague, which was in April. So after that, I had AI related keynote on when a tool is not a tool at the Big ID conference. I spoke at the CDO symposium at MIT about leveraging beauty and brains for effective data storytelling. This was in mid-July. I had a lot of fun with that one. Wow, I always have fun. So anyway, I'm uh, keeping September and October open. I'm not, or August and September, not taking any speaking engagements there because I'm focusing on work and more importantly my family. So my next speaking engagements are not until October, and they're back to back. A talk on the madness behind the method at the Carolina Regional Conference near Charlotte, in North Carolina, that is, followed by the closing keynote at the Global CISO Forum in Atlanta. And those two are less than 36 hours apart. So really, really close together. I don't do that very often. And they're both live in person. And I don't think I've ever done two of them that close together. But since then, or in between now and then, two or three different podcast interviews, besides our own. The most important one, of course, is our own show here, and about maybe 8 or 9 published articles, hopefully between now and then. So quite a bit going on. Really, really busy. How about you, Tiffany? What's going on with you?
Well, also very, very busy. We just had our Intelligent Thinking AI Summit and we had 1,950 live attendees for the
Wow.
virtual event. So it was fantastic. And for anybody that missed the event, you can actually still access the live event now and it'll be active for another 90 days. So they can still go in and enjoy the virtual expo hall and networking capabilities. And of course, watch all of the sessions, which are so fascinating. We covered many different dimensions of AI, AIoT, generative AI, you name it. So, very informative, very enlightening, just a wonderful event. And we also have our upcoming Summit of Things event happening this October. And that's October 22nd through the 24th. And we have speaking, sponsorship, and advertising opportunities available for that we are filling up fast. And then we also have our Industry Insights IoT Awards this December. So for anyone watching that has not yet nominated your favorite product, company, or person, you can still do so. And you can get tickets for all of our upcoming events all at iotmktg.com. And on a personal note, my son just turned 1. So Xander is a
Yeah.
1 year old. I can't believe it. It seems like the time just flew by. And he had not one, but two birthday parties. And the theme was
Wow.
Wild One. So he got some great gifts. He got a Jeep, a bumper car for in the house, lots of fun, and lots of other nice gifts too. So it was just a beautiful bringing together of friends and family, and it was amazing. So still have butterflies from it.
That's great.
And now
Well,
back
happy
to,
birthday.
thank you so much. And now
Yep.
back to today's topic, critical thinking. So what is critical thinking? Well, critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing from, or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. And some examples of critical thinking include problem solving, decision making, prioritization, strategy, planning, and judgment. But Dr. Joe, what is critical thinking to you? And can you share a few examples of critical thinking?
Absolutely. Um, you hit the nail on the head, as usual, Tiffany, with an excellent way of saying it. But critical thinking to me, I think it's less about memorizing definitions and maybe more about an entire mindset. Our viewers they already know how much I like to look up meanings and know the etymology of words. But this one, the word critical, is no exception. It's real interesting. The word's derived from the Greek word kritikos, which means to discern or judge. So, with that in mind, critical thinking is the active process of evaluating information with, a discerning eye. Okay, it's about approaching every piece of information with a healthy dose of skepticism and curiosity. You're actively judging its worth and relevance. It's the ability to question assumptions, evaluate evidence, and come out of it forming your own conclusion. Now, I would imagine that you could characterize it somewhat like being a detective, but instead of solving crimes, you're solving puzzles of information. Let me give you a couple of examples, as you asked, Tiffany. Let's say you're evaluating a news article, for instance. When doing so, well, critical thinking will help you to distinguish between facts and opinions, to spot potential biases, and also to consider alternatives in your perspectives. Like if when you make a big decision, maybe buying a house, let's say, or changing jobs. Okay, critical thinking will help you weigh the pros and cons, assess risks, and explore different options available to you. Even in our all of our day-to-day lives, critical thinking will help us solve problems, make informed decisions, and even adapt to new situations. As a matter of fact, Tiffany, a 2020 survey by the Reboot Foundation of more than 1,000 adults found that while 94% of people believe that critical thinking is extremely important or very important in the survey, only 60% reported having studied critical thinking in school, and 86% find these skills lacking in the general public. This huge gap, I believe, really highlights how important it is to focus on teaching and develop critical thinking skills. You know, it's not just key for individual growth and success. That's obvious. But I believe it's also vital for tackling difficult issues that are facing our society today. Now, earlier, you mentioned some key benefits of critical thinking, Tiffany. Improving our decision making and problem solving. And I said the same thing. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how critical thinking has personally impacted your life, and if you can agree that it's a skill that everyone should strive to know. What are your thoughts on that, Tiffany?
Thanks, Dr. Joe.
Yeah.
And absolutely, everyone should acquire this skill. Critical thinking has positively impacted my life in many ways. I use it pretty much every day. And I do have a story for you, Dr. Joe, about how critical thinking saved my life.
Oh boy.
And so it was a hot and muggy summer day in Ohio. And my friends Bill and Stacy invited us to go out on a boat, their pontoon boat, which didn't seem like a dangerous expedition at all, but it was for me. And as we ventured out onto the water of Indian Lake, the sun beat down on us. And it was so hot. And at last, we came to a clearing. And Bill announced, "All right, guys, jump in anywhere." I'd never been on a pontoon boat before, but even if I hadn't got into the water from a pontoon boat. And me not knowing much about pontoon boats, I just jumped right in, right off the
Oh
front of the
no.
boat. And beneath the water, I could feel myself being pulled backwards under the boat towards the propeller. And when I realized it was the motor pulling me back, I tried my best not to panic. And he had not pulled up the propeller yet when he said to jump in. So it's kind of on him, but more on me for not knowing that you shouldn't jump off the front of a pontoon boat. And so when I came to the water's surface, I realized, oh my God, I am under the boat. And I didn't know if it was going to be my last breath or if I was going to survive this. I mean, I felt myself getting tucked back in. I was like, your legs are going to get chopped, Tiffani. What are you going to do? And then immediately critical thinking kicked in. And I thought, okay, I could go left or right. Now I can't go left or right because it's a pontoon boat. I don't know how deep these propellers are. I can go forward. And I didn't want my legs to get chopped off. So I tucked in my legs really tight and I took one last breath of air and I hoped it wasn't going to be my last. And I just paddled and paddled and paddled and paddled and paddled and paddled. And I mean, I'm getting sucked back. So you got to keep paddling and paddling and paddling. And then finally, at last, I felt Stacy's arm grab my arm and pull me to at least safety at the front of the boat. And she's like, let me pull you up. I said, no, no, no. I'm going to go into shock right now. I said, just let me hang here. I'm good. Like, we're good. Like, but it was very, very much like a life threatening situation that I was in. And critical thinking really led me to, it was like a computer that just like turned on, and it was this intelligent thinking process where it was just like, okay, you're under a boat. Okay, take a deep breath. Okay, you're going to swim. You're going to tuck your legs. It all happened so fast. And definitely it was because I was so keen at my skills for critical
Wow.
thinking that got me through that. So pretty crazy when you say, Dr. Joe.
That was an amazing story. I am so glad that you let critical thinking take over and thereby giving you a plan of action rather than a plan of succumbing to your panic. Plan of action is always better than plan of panic. So well done, girl. Well done.
Thank you. And now let's
Wow.
discuss other reasons why critical thinking is important. A few reasons that are that it helps to improve decision making, enhances the ability to solve problems, assists with research skills, improves creativity, and my favorite, it stimulates creativity. And there are many advantages to critical thinking as it is key to career success and even relationships. And critical thinking can be useful in most any job pretty much all the time. And it's also, as you mentioned, great for choosing the right job if you're switching careers to be able to analyze
Mhm.
what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? How do you want to create your day? Really thinking through critical thinking about those topics. And it can also be great for relationships because you can take your feelings into account, other people's feelings into account, their motives, your motives, and really take away the emotion from what you're dealing with and look at the what's happening in a factual way and kind of really analyze things from like a third party where you're getting outside of yourself to kind of look at what's happening. So critical thinking can be very powerful in relationships, your career, and those are just a few examples of why it's important to me especially. So why do you feel that critical thinking is important, Dr. Joe?
Well, Tiffany, you gave some um, excellent, excellent reasons, and an excellent question too. I believe that critical thinking is essential because it's the cornerstone of informed citizenship. Uh, I believe it was Thomas Jefferson who wisely noted, "An informed citizenry is at the heart of a dynamic democracy." In today's era, when we are inundated with information from all directions, the ability to discern fact from fiction, to be able to identify biases and to evaluate multiple perspectives is absolutely paramount. It's this very skill that empowers us to make sound judgments. And, well, we participate meaningfully in democratic processes to harken back to the reference from Jefferson, and hopefully to have a more equitable society. But critical thinking, I suppose it could also be called the engine of innovation, if you will. Yeah, but by challenging assumptions and exploring alternative solutions, we can encourage creativity and progress. Okay, it's what drives scientific discovery, technological advancements, and the development of new ideas. That's better for everybody. And I'm reminded of a great historical example of critical thinking in action. Now, you told a story. This one isn't quite as dramatic and amazing as the story you told, but it's from history. It's the story of the Enigma code breakers from World War II. I wrote about this in one of my articles recently, as a matter of fact. Anyway, the Enigma machine. Okay, that was a tool that was used by Nazi Germany to scramble their military messages so nobody could, understand them. And of course, cracking its code was vital for the Allies to accomplish. A brilliant mathematician named Alan Turing and his crew at Bletchley Park, I think it was called, really showcased critical thinking by questioning the norms and coming up with brand new methods to decode the enigma. And these efforts demanded not only sharp analytical skills, but also a knack for creative and critical team-based problem solving. Successfully breaking the Enigma code is believed to have played a huge role in shortening the war and saving many lives. To sum it up, Tiffany, critical thinking, it isn't just a skill. Okay. I believe that it's a responsibility. It's about honoring the power of your mind and using it to its full God given potential to build upon Jefferson's ideal of an informed citizenry. To do that, we need to be the ones to cultivate critical thinking skills at every level of society. You know, given the complexity of the world around us, how we interpret information plays a crucial role in shaping our understanding and responses, Tiffany. And you know what? It might even influence our perception. What do you think? Can you elaborate on that perception concept a little bit?
Of course, Dr. Joe. And in order to make an informed decision, you need to have a clear view of the facts of the situation. And when we have limited facts and distorted communication, which it seems like is pretty apparent today, we're unable to use the right discernment to have accurate perception of what's happening in the world. And the media plays a central role in informing the public about what happens in the world, and particularly in those areas in which audiences do not possess direct knowledge or experience. If it's somewhere across the world, we have no idea what's really happening there, or, and it could still be that maybe a reporter is interpreting what's happening a certain way and then letting people know the facts in their perception. But it takes a really well rounded set of facts and opinions to really form a clear view of what's actually happening. So, this leads me to one of the most important components of critical thinking: perception. And perception is how we receive and translate information. It's like an advanced filtering system that defines how we think. And perception is based on the five senses: smell, taste, touch, hear, and see. And sometimes things aren't what they seem, and our perception doesn't really match reality. And this has been proven in experiments such as the selective attention test with the so called invisible gorilla, where viewers were asked to watch a video of people passing the ball on a court. It was a basketball, and count how many times that the ball was bounced and passed. And studies showed that the viewers were so focused on the ball that they seemed to not notice a man walk by in a gorilla suit. And I've actually even watched the video. I was in a part of a mastermind group. And when I saw the video, I didn't notice the gorilla. I have to say, I didn't notice it the first time. And then looking back on it after the fact and you watch the video, you're like, how do you not see the gorilla? But trust me, if you don't know about the gorilla, you kind of miss it. So, Dr. Joe, what are your thoughts on perception and its key role in critical thinking?
Sure. Oh man, I love that story. Well, Tiffany, as usual, once again, you hit the nail on the head with your perceptions on perception. Perception is indeed the foundation on which we build our understanding of the world, of everything, as a matter of fact. It's like the lens, if you will, through which we view reality, shaping our thoughts, our beliefs, and even our actions. While our senses, the ones you mentioned, provide raw data, it's our brain that interprets and assigns meaning to that data that you so eloquently figured out, explained. To that point, your most excellent and hilarious example of the video with the guy in the monkey suit or the gorilla suit, that perfectly illustrates the concepts of what behavioral scientists call intention, attentional blindness. All right, it's a fascinating phenomenon where we miss obvious details due to focused attention. It's almost as if our brains have this the built-in filter that you were talking about, but in this case, it blocks out everything deemed irrelevant. This phenomenon isn't just limited to controlled experiments. It pops up in everyday life. We do it. That's the way we, in unexpected ways. Take, for instance, the delightfully quirky unicycle experiment. Unicycle, clown on a unicycle. You talk about gorillas, I'll talk about clowns on unicycles. Okay, it was done in 2009, I believe, Western University. Okay, a very colorfully dressed clown in full costume riding a unicycle up and down a bustling campus square for an hour. Now, you'd think that something like that, like a guy in a gorilla suit, would be impossible to miss, right? Nope. Out of more than 300, almost 350 pedestrians observed in the study, only 25% of those who were chatting on their cell phones or texting or whatever noticed our circus-worthy friend when prompted about it later. And interestingly enough, people who are walking with friends or listening to music or strolling about by themselves were much more likely to spot the one-wheeled wonder. Yeah, it's a funny yet powerful demonstration of how our focus on one singular task can render us oblivious to the unexpected, even when it's pedaling right in front of us. These examples, Tiffani, underscore the example or the importance of mindfulness and conscious awareness in our perception of the world. All of these things, they're needed for critical thinking. See, they reveal just how easily we can miss the forest for the trees, or in this case, the clown for the crowd. It's a, a stark reminder that what we perceive is often just a fraction of what is actually happening around us. For you see, critical thinking is absolutely essential for countering these biases, these preconceptions that often distort our perception, our reality. It allows us to question our assumptions, seek out alternate perspectives, and gather additional information to form a more accurate picture of reality. Um, by developing our critical thinking skills, excellent choice of topic, by the way, Tiffani. Um, we um, we can enhance our ability to perceive the world around us with greater clarity and objectivity. Even it's it's about training ourselves to look beyond our immediate focus, take off the blinders, be open to the unexpected, and approach our surroundings with a sense of curiosity and awareness. I mean, after all, in a world full of metaphorical unicycling clowns, a little extra attention and critical thinking can go a long way in helping us navigate through our complex reality much more effectively. And whether it's a clown on a unicycle or a guy in a gorilla suit, maybe, just maybe, we can catch a few more entertaining surprises along the way. So, so far, yeah, we've talked about how important critical thinking is, right? Along with the role that perception plays in shaping our understanding of the world around us, as you so expertly pointed out, Tiffani. And you know what? For us to effectively navigate the complexities of life and decision making that's involved in critical thinking, you know what? I think we need to understand how we think, right? So, Tiffani, can you share your insights on maybe different thinking styles and maybe how they influence our problem solving approaches? And of course, if you have anything else you want to add about perception, that's okay too.
Thanks, Dr. Joe. For a second, I thought you were just going to keep clowning around.
Punch. I love it. I love it. You're awesome.
Well, there are several styles of thinking: normal thinking, critical thinking, analytical, and creative thinking, just to name a few. And all of them are important and all are influenced by perception. So, first, let's look at normal thinking versus critical thinking. Well, normal thinking is kind of our basic operating system. We naturally think without fact or evidence. Normal thinking does not consider alternative options or points of view. Normal thinking does not enable adaptability. Normal thinking would have let me have my
Mm,
legs chopped off underneath a pontoon
yeah.
boat. Normal thinking is based on our basic truths, instincts, and what we've been taught, influencing our perception and how we behave, react, and think. And critical thinking, on the other hand, allows you to analyze all the facts and information in full detail. Critical thinking encourages curiosity. Critical thinking makes us more adaptable. And it leads us to consider what something means and why things happen. So, with critical thinking, our perception is not just based on face value. It allows us to question things and really open up our perception to see things from other perspectives. And then there's analytical thinking, which is part of critical thinking. Analytical thinking involves breaking down complex information into smaller parts, while critical thinking involves taking outside knowledge into account while evaluating information. So they kind of work hand in hand. And
Yeah.
analytical perception will take into account all the facts available and draw a conclusion. So then there's also creative thinking. Creative thinking is the act of diverging one's thinking to explore many different options. Depending on the situation, both analytical and creative thinking can be complementary and necessary, especially for critical thinking. And your imagination could play a part in your perception when you use creative thinking. So, Dr. Joe, what are your thoughts on the roles of analytical and creative thinking in critical thinking?
Sure, Tiffany. Let me first say that was an absolutely brilliant explanation of the different types of thinking because I'm sitting here trying not to wipe the drool from my mouth, as I hear you talk. Say, yes, you go, Tiffany, cheering you on. But anyway, another great question. I love it because this is my wheelhouse. Okay, I see analytical and creative thinking as well, kind of like the twin pillars of critical thinking, as you pointed out. They're complementary processes that work in tandem, together to solve problems and make informed decisions. Um, Let me put it this way. Imagine critical thinking as being like a surgeon's scalpel, for instance, right? Dissecting information into its component parts to understand its structure and relationships. It helps us identify patterns, spot inconsistencies, and evaluate evidence, and do so objectively. However, without creativity, analysis can become rigid and limited. And on the flip side, creativity asks it's going to act as the catalyst for innovation, enabling us to see beyond conventional thinking and generate new ideas, as you alluded to. You might say it's the spark that ignites breakthroughs and encourages unconventional solutions. Um, a compelling historical example of this dynamic interplay, if you will, was the construction of the Great Wall of China during the Ming Dynasty, about the mid 1300s to about the mid 1600s, something like that. Faced with constant threats from northern invaders, the Ming Dynasty rulers employed analytical thinking to meticulously plan the construction of the wall, considering all the different kinds of terrain, the materials, the defensive structures that they were going to include at key points along the way. At the same time, the builders had to get creative to overcome that tough, varied landscape using local materials and coming up with new construction techniques. So the Great Wall, to this day, more than 400 years, almost 400 years, stands to be a testament of the power of human engineering and the power of creativity as well. By the same token, the ideal critical thinker knows how to combine both analysis and creativity. They can break down complex problems, again, as you alluded to, gather information, zoom out to see the bigger picture, and then turn around and dive deep into the data, and then let their imagination run wild to come up with fresh, ideas. It's this blend of analytical skills and creative flair that sets a critical thinker apart. You got to have both. Now, what's your take on both analytical and critical thinking, Tiffani? And what are some ways that you have found that you can actually use critical thinking?
Thank you, Dr. Joe. I mean, hearing you talk about the Great Wall and how they built that, it reminds me of another great critical thinker, and that's Walt Disney. And when
Yeah.
Walt Disney was building his theme parks, given he pretty much put together the schematics for the world's first smart city. And when he was doing the layout of his parks, when they were developing, the different walkways and things, he didn't have too much developed in the beginning because he wanted to see how the people moved and then fill in the gaps around it
Oh,
so that it complemented the natural way that people already moved through the parks. And when it came to where to put the trash cans, he would start at the beginning of the park and eat a candy bar. And at the first time that he would need a trash can, that's where he would place the trash cans, is as he walked through the parks eating candy bars. So, I mean, he's another great critical thinker, in my opinion, that really deserves some recognition in this conversation. But now, as a Libra, I'm all about balance. So I feel that I use analytical and creative thinking in tandem. As you mentioned, it can be very powerful. Yes, it is very powerful. And because it's one thing to identify a problem, but it's better if you can also come up with a few possible solutions, which is what I always try to do. I never
yes.
say, here's what's wrong without having something to say, here's a solution. It's always better to have a solution in mind if you're raising a concern to the table. And for example, I use both creative and analytical thinking all the time in marketing, as they both assist me to be able to take the results from my last marketing campaigns and examine them to figure out what we're going to do next to improve and optimize them. What works and how can we make it better? And as far as how we can use critical thinking, I found that when dealing with any important decision, and critical thinking is needed, breaking down the information into the who, what, where, when, why, and how makes all the difference. And I mean, I do this in my relationships. If there's something bothering me, I try to figure out, okay, who am I upset with? What actually happened? What am I upset about? When did this start? Where did it start? Physically, and what kind of space was I in my mind? Why am I feeling the way I am, and how can we fix it? So if you start breaking down, any kind of objective you're trying to get a solution for, whether that's a challenge in your life, at work, or otherwise, you can really start to figure things out a lot faster and a lot easier. And researching using multiple sources is a great way, considering
Yeah.
the intent behind a source is another great way to use critical thinking. And as an empath, I naturally put myself in the position of others all the time and consider their feelings and intentions, which is both a blessing and a curse. But you can also weigh out multiple options and assess consequences, which is another fabulous way to use critical thinking. So, Dr. Joe, what advice would you give someone on ways to exercise critical thinking?
Well, after that brilliant diet, brilliant exposition, you've given me a lot of food for thought as far as advice is concerned. And as I see it, cultivating critical thinking, Tiffani, is I'd say it's much like refining a precious metal. Okay. Just as gold requires careful extraction, purification, and shaping, critical thinking demands deliberate practice and refinement. Did you know that the process of refining gold can achieve a purity level of something like 99.999%? This attention to detail is exactly the thing that we need to sharpen our critical thinking abilities. I would encourage our viewers to start out by questioning everything, I mean. Don't just take information at face value. Look for different viewpoints and consider the other side of the coin, the other side of the argument. Have some meaningful conversations with people who might think just a little bit differently than you do. And then read a variety of materials, dive into different topics and ideas, challenge your own beliefs, and be willing to shift your perspective a little bit if necessary. What else? I'd say also focus on active listening. Really, really tune into what others are saying without cutting them off. Make a conscious effort to grasp their viewpoint before you respond. And lastly, don't shy away from failure. Mistakes, yeah, I mean, this is going to sound counterintuitive, but in reality, mistakes are great learning moments, believe it or not. Reflect on what went wrong, analyze it, and then use those insights to enhance your decision making down the line and hopefully avoid making that same mistake again. And hopefully, well, it's like refining gold is going to turn, let's see, it's going to turn it into something valuable. Okay. Turning your critical thinking skills is going to help you make better decisions and play a meaningful role in society. You're going to become part of that informed citizenry that Jefferson spoke about from my quote earlier. Tiffani, thank you. Thank you so very much for this enlightening program. Yeah, I think we've covered some really key points about critical thinking. And I absolutely urge our viewers to keep digging into this subject on your own. Practice these skills in your everyday life, and hopefully you'll learn to be an even better, more effective critical thinker, and bring even greater value to those about you and even to your own life, to your own family, and wherever you might happen to go. Back to you, Tiffani.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joe. I think that was beautiful. And I loved what you said about active listening. I think not only listening to someone until they're done, but also another great, we could do a whole episode on active listening, really.
Yeah.
But, by asking supportive questions, show someone that you're actually listening and give yourself the ability to make a more well rounded judgment if there's still, loose ends that you need to understand before you can give someone advice maybe, or we'll have to ponder on this as we go further into
Yeah.
the active listening episode, because I could go on and on about this, so I'm not going to do that on this episode. We're going to pretty much cut
Oh.
it here, but I do have lots more to share with you on that topic. And so thank you so much for joining us today. For everyone watching, I hope you found it very valuable and you'll start exercising critical thinking a little more just by knowing it's there as a gentle reminder to use that skill that you have buried deep in your mind. And be sure to register for our upcoming events, a summit of things coming up in October, and nominate your favorite person, product, or company for the Industry Insights IoT Awards this December. I mean, Dr. Joe was Thought Leader of the Year during our Industry Insights IoT Awards in the past. So who knows? You watching, you may be the next winner. So be sure to nominate and get your tickets all at iotmktg.com. And I mean, it only does make sense that you would be Thought Leader of the Year, Dr. Joe. I mean, you are such a
Oh.
fantastic co-host after all.
Oh, that is so very kind and sweet of you to say, Tiffani. I mean, it's kind of easy for me to be a great co-host because I got the best co-host in the world as an example. So, you
Uh,
are off the charts, Tiffani. Absolutely. But thank you for your kind words.
and thank you for joining me. And thank you all for joining us as well and for watching. And you have a great day. And we will see you on the next episode of Mind to Mind. Have a wonderful